Welcome to today's episode of CLCI Live, brought to you by the award-winning and ICF accredited school, Certified Life Coach Institute. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode.
Hello, everybody. Before we get started, as per usual, we want to invite you, beg you, as Ernest Washington is doing right now. He is an A+ student. He started before I even gave the invitation. Thank you, Ernest, for being an amazing demonstration of what we're looking for. We are looking for participation and to hear from you guys. So please join in the convo. Drop anything that any of your thoughts, questions, anything in the chat on whichever social media you are on, and we will be monitoring it. And would love to hear from you. So hi, Ernest Washington. Good to see you. All right, that's it. Somebody else talk about what we are talking about.
We are talking about if you can really know yourself. Can you truly know who you are and what you want and what makes you happy? And yeah, I came at this, I don't know if you guys did, but I came to this subject thinking about how coaches just take for granted that the client knows what they want. The research suggests otherwise, though, that people don't truly know themselves, and they may not even know what they want, or when they dig down, they may say one thing but do a different thing. So we try to look at it as coaches and try to rationalize and figure out what the heck's going on. How can you know yourself?
Very cool. I'm going to share some resources too in the chat right off for you guys to, if you want to peruse these are the kind of places we do research, and I thought it might be nice for us to share these things with you guys. So we're going to do that. So can you ever know yourself? Anthony asked a question. I did not give an answer. What are your thoughts?
But do you have an answer since you're already?
Since I'm already babbling.
I have my answer, but I want to know your guys' answer first.
I have moments where I absolutely feel like I know myself, and I feel very headstrong and certain of that. Then I have other moments where it's not that I don't know myself, it's that I feel like I have no clue what's going on inside of me. And I don't know, it's something I got to sort through later. And then I have moments where I just don't want to think, and I don't want to have to know anything. And I just want somebody else to think for me. So I can span the gamut. Because there are definitely moments where I'm just like, oh God, I don't want to deal with that. Can somebody else think about that for me? And that's when I'm like, what do you want to eat? Not because I don't know myself, just because I don't want to think about it.
Well, let me ask an even more fundamental question then how do you know who you are? Let me just ask, who are you?
It's a good question.
Let's just start with that. Who are you, Brooke?
Me, I'm Brooke Adair Walters. I guess I would say the parts of myself that I identify with most. I'm a human being. I am a hard worker. I am creative. And I am a person who likes people. And I also like a challenge and like to be, I like to live life. Say, all in all, I'm a pretty positive human. Okay. But mostly I can be all things too, though. I can span the gamut. So I'm just Brooke. I'm Brooke. Yo soy Brooke.
Lisa, who are you?
I hate to say a lot of the same things as Brooke, but I would say that I'm not as creative as she is. I do have creative moments. I enjoy people. I love my family and my friends. I enjoy exploring what makes people tick. I enjoy, what do I enjoy about myself?
But yeah,
I'm generally a positive person. I can ruminate. I'm working on ruminating less. What were you going to say, Brooke?
I was going to ask, does the things we enjoy define ourselves?
Is it ego we're defining, or is it ourself we're defining?
I'm just
that's
asking
what
a
I'm not
simple
real
question.
sure.
I want to, before we move on to that question, Brooke, I want to go
Okay.
to Jerome now. Who are you, Jerome?
Well, I want to preface that by saying I don't think I know who I am, because I try and grow as often as I can, and different things are happening all the time. So to really just keep my finger exactly on an answer as to say who I am, I'm not sure, but I do know like some of my big values, my core value. Like I live for my friends and my family. Um, I try to be kind to everyone I meet, regardless of what walk of life you come from. Um, I'm a huge believer in karma. That ties into that. Those are like some of the three things that really kind of define me. But there's a lot of minor things that kind of shift and change every day. So I don't know that I can say I know who I really like. I think that's the question we're asking, who we really are. So
So I noticed with all three of you guys, though, when I asked that question, Brooke and Lisa, you gave qualities about yourself. Jerome, you gave more so about how you focus on growth and values. None of you said anything about maybe your function or purpose. Like you never, Brooke, you said you're a human. That's obvious, but no one said, well, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a CEO, I'm an owner, I'm a athlete, a gamer.
That's because that's what I do. That's not who I am. I don't know.
Well, some
You
people
know.
some people do define. I mean, I'm just noticing that it's interesting that people who I've met with in real life, they do define themselves by what they do. You guys didn't do that. You guys went off on what you like to do, what
Well,
your actions are, what qualities you
to be
have.
fair though, I didn't not say what I do because the things I listed about myself are part of my what I do. Like I'm creative. Well, I try to because of that I try to make sure that the things I'm doing have creativity to them. And then I'm hardworking, and so that translates to no matter what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So I mean, I guess.
So we're talking about the core competencies for ourselves, right? The basicness of who we are can transcend whatever we're doing and wherever we are. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying that I use what I do is tied to who I am.
Yeah.
They're intrinsically linked. Not maybe not the case for everybody, but I think to some degree, yeah, it is because I think our actions do define who we are to some degree because we're gonna do things for certain reasons. So it's just a different lens.
Yeah.
Perhaps I don't know.
I don't know. I just find that whenever I meet someone new and we're getting to know like who you are, it's usually, oh, so what do you do?
I avoid that though. Like I don't
That's like the first question that a lot of people will ask when someone else is trying to figure out who you are. Well, what is it you do?
I have no idea. And I like avoid that question too. Like there's been plenty of times I've avoided that question. Because I've had mixed reactions too. Because if I really share about like what I've done in my life experience, sometimes people just they get intimidated to some degree, or they can't relate, or we go down where I don't want to be defined by that. I guess. So I've had just a gamut of reactions to it. So it's not something that I typically even bring up right away with people. I don't know, but that's just me.
Do you guys think that is a common thing that people do when they get to know each other? That
yeah, I'm sure.
thing that other people want to know you is, okay, so what do you do? Like maybe they're not too interested in about your qualities if you are artistic or
I guess that just feels unfair to me because it's like putting me in I do a lot of things. Like I don't just do one thing.
As a coach, I have used that and with some of my clients to find out who they are and what they do and what what they do in a day in a life, and part of that allows me to use metaphors and um, so that I can share with them that co-creating space
I
in
think
their language versus how I would necessarily share.
this is a language barrier thing. Like I think that if you ask me what I did for a living, it'd be different, right? Like then if you ask me what I do. um,
Asking what you do.
well, I do a lot of things. But it's not necessarily what is making my job. And I think
What What's the most surprising thing about yourself that you went through, discovered, something happened and you go, God, I never thought I would do that.
God, I don't know. There's too many. I have PTSD. Do you know how many moments I have like that? The list is long. Surprising good or surprise? I don't have that. I don't know.
No, just anything.
There's another observation is that I think maybe it's because we share some very common assumptions about ourselves, but
That's yeah.
a lot of times people also identify themselves by the groups they're with. I'm a American. I'm an English speaker. I am a Californian. I'm a life coach. That puts
Well,
me that puts me in certain categories of people
I
that
definitely
I share some similar qualities with these other people who are in this group. I'm a man. That's another one, and people take gender identity very seriously as well. Um, but Brooke was the only one who mentioned maybe one group identifier.
which was what did I say?
You just said you're a human,
Oh, human, yeah.
although
Um,
that's pretty much always taken for granted.
Not a
although
Martian.
I think there's something we're leaving out in this, right? There's a lot of context that we're not isn't applied. And I think that that's something that's critical. Like, I think that one of the things that drives me nuts about personality tests and things like, this is how you're always going to be, is one of the things that often leave out is a matter of context. Because even in one of the talks, the TED talk, the Who Are You Really, the Puzzle of Personality, he talks about if who we are is not made up by our traits, are the things that the things we tend to fall into, but really who you are comes forward in your idiosyncrasies, and like the little thing, your idiosyncratic self is what he said, and I quite enjoyed that. But he also pointed out that he was a self-professed introvert, but he is also a professor, and as a professor he knows he has to be extroverted and have extroverted moments, and in order to be successful in what he does, he steps out of his typical this is what I identify as, and assumes a different role and personality for the sake of knowing he wants to do a good job at being a professor. So I think that was a very powerful example, because what it did is address the fact that we are not always one thing in every situation. We are very malleable human beings that will wear a different outfit, change our suit, apply a different sort of methodology with regard to how we act and behave if a situation calls for it. And if we know in our experience that we will have more success by acting or behaving a specific way. Of course, then there's those who haven't figured that out and can be very self-destructive, and then we go, what are you doing? Why would you behave that way? But I mean, truthfully, it may be that they're just behaving out of character, or and that's where these things come up, is yes, being adaptable is a very important thing. And I think that's where personality traits and quizzes and putting ourselves in those boxes falls short to some degree, because I think as much as we all think we're different, we are all capable of all things, which makes us all very similar. So thoughts. I just soapboxed, but
No, I definitely agree that the adaptability, even in coaching, if we apply that to coaching, that which you were speaking of, we do have to be adaptable for the different clients that we work with. That adaptability makes them feel relatable and find comfort with the ability to dig deeper and share. If we didn't have that, I mean, I think I mentioned this last week or the week before, whatever. You know, whoever I'm speaking with in the moment, sometimes I can pick up that way that they speak and the accent they speak, and I don't do it on purpose. It is just that I've adapted to that person, and as I'm hearing them, reflecting in the way that they're sharing. So when you're talking about, you didn't say adaptability, I said adaptability, but that's how it relates to me, of being able to be that chameleon in that moment. I've done things. Reason earlier I asked you what outstanding things have you done that caught your attention. I didn't say it like that, but you know, I've done things and I go, where did that come from? You know, and so us being able to recognize who we are and what our wants are, and can change, just like you said, depending on who we're with and what we're doing. What I want from you, Brooke, is totally different than what I want from Anthony.
Have okay, so in the you had asked that question, is there anything you've ever done that really surprised you? I'm going to ask it a sort of different way. Has there ever been a time that somebody reflected back to you who you were and it surprised you, and you were like,
Yeah.
wait, I come off that way, or I'm that way, wait, really? And you were like, no, I mean, you're just, I mean, like, but it didn't ring true, or maybe it made you look at yourself through a different lens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Share, tell us
So
more.
there's been different times I've had different people share with me their view of me, and I'm like, oh, you got that? Okay, let me, you know, reflect what you're saying. You know, think about. I'm a big thinker. That you know, rumination. How does that come off? Most of the time, it's a positive statement that they're sharing with me, but at times it has been negative, and it's like, oh my gosh, well, that's definitely not, if it was a negative, what my intention was. But I have to look at that and see, you know, what was going on in that moment. And then sometimes it's just flat out wrong. I've had someone say, well, this is what you're feeling. I'm like, no, not at all. I don't even know what you're, this is, and you and I have talked about moments like that, Brooke, where I've shared that this is not even, not with you, about, you know, some other incidences that have occurred. This is not even in my wheelhouse. I don't even know why a person would think that. So absolutely, they have shared with me different variations of, and it's their interpretation of me, and really it's who they are, right? It's based on how they see in me either things that they don't want in themselves or things that they want in themselves that they really kind of have. You know, that superhero, you know, who's your superhero?
That's that's funny, Lisa. I've actually been contemplating this recently. Um, I've had a person in my life that I've had to kind of separate from recently, and he was someone that would like to kind of what you were mentioning, say that you were this particular type of person, or you had this habit that you would normally do, and it was really him. I think kind of trying to shed some of the stuff that really made up who he was as a person, and I'm not sure exactly where that comes from, but I can tell you with coaching, at least you have someone that can hold you accountable if you are, a client in a coaching session. That's something that could be really beneficial, is because sometimes we really don't realize exactly, maybe the type of harm, if we are harming somebody, or the type of person we're being, until we speak it and it's reflected back to us. Especially with coaching, that's the name of the game, is to make sure you have accurate reflection when it comes to reciting some of the things that your clients say. So I think that's a space where you can be tremendously helped.
Anthony, you got very quiet.
Yeah, I'm just sort of turning things around in my head. One is kind of addressing Lisa and Jerome about, isn't it? It seems a bit of a stretch to say that people are projecting their own things on you from what they're telling you.
Yeah, at
Uh,
times.
I
I have
don't
an
know.
example. I have an example. Before you go on, let me give you the example. I know someone who, I've seen out when we go out and go shopping and they're trying to get the sale price that they thought they were supposed to get. And the clerk says, hey, it's beyond, but they're getting yelled at. Or how about the server that you forgot their guacamole and they're getting yelled at? Now, the server wasn't doing anything. The server's been, at least I'm talking about the ones I'm doing here and in this particular box. They weren't rude, they weren't disrespectful, and yet the person on the other side is very rude and very disrespectful to that other human being who, wasn't trying to put angst in their life.
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead.
But we're talking about more extreme. Like we're talking about well, somebody's reacting in anger. But I'm just talking about when I asked that, I was saying just like more on like a personality trait level. That's not a trait that I saw in myself, or I didn't realize I was that until somebody said that to me. A good example for me is I think I've always thought of myself as an approachable human being, to some degree. Mind you, as I'm saying this, I realized there was a time I got tattoos in the hopes to keep certain people away from me because I was I was deliberately trying to be less approachable. But I think that I've always tried to have a smile on my face and welcome people in and be approachable. But I've had people who told me that they thought I didn't like them, or they thought they were that I was intimidating, or I was, and I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from, and it's not something that I considered. And I'm like, okay, and then I of course turn inwards and I go, okay, wait, how am I making myself unapproachable because I want to be approachable? So that becomes important to me, and so then I make sure I try to adjust my behavior so that I am more approachable, which is interesting. As I'm sharing that, I'm thinking that adjusting, it's really so much us defining who we want to be and what we want to be, right?
I'm not sure about that, and necessarily. And the reason I hear what you're saying, and we all do it to kind of fit in that moment. It's that person who recognizes things differently than the way we are, or the way. So it's their interpretation of something. I'm trying to think of an example, and right now I'm skipping the example because I can't think of it. But it's their interpretation of something, of who we are and what we're doing. It's not necessarily who we are and what we're doing, right? They were brought up to be in this, psychology stuff. As coaches, we don't really play with, but they were brought up to recognize family systems in the way that their family system worked. And in that, they recognize different personality traits, different reasons in their life experience. So if they're telling you that it's uncomfortable, that you're unapproachable, it may have nothing to do with you and everything to do with how they interpret themselves. The thing that we all do, being empathetic towards others, the comfort space. So going back to what we adapt in that them to find their comfort. So with you not being approachable, totally may had nothing to do with you, but had everything to do with how they're comfortable in their skin.
Which I can 100% agree with.
That gets back to my original point that I was trying to make, though. I don't know if you can actually know that, and I don't think that, like, we'll just use that as the example. There's you. I'm using you for all of us, but so I'll just say me. There's me, who I think is pretty approachable, but there's the other person who sees me as an unapproachable person. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think both can be true, and they are the real version of me, because my reality is one thing, another person's reality is their own reality.
Yeah.
I don't think it's enough to just say that, well, they're projecting because maybe they're insecure and they don't know how to reach out to people or whatever. That seems to be me then projecting and trying to reconcile what I think of myself versus how they interpret me.
So that's where. So
this is getting so deep.
What I want to say though, but what I want is, but then what we'll always do, right? When somebody says something that's surprising to us, if we are somebody who cares about that and we respect that person's opinion, right? Even if we don't, maybe we typically go through a series of checks and balances, right?
Yep.
And we go through a checks and balance. Okay, is this who I am? How am I behaving? How is this my fault?
Is this
And we
really
start,
true?
and then
Yeah.
maybe we also speak to other people. Do I come off this way? Do you think I'm this way? And do I, you know what I mean? And if somebody we know or that knows us very well, and from that we assess. Okay, maybe if I want, this is partially my fault, so I'm going to change here, or maybe this has nothing to do with me. Ultimately, this was a fluke thing, and they don't really know who I am, so I'm just going to disregard, right? Yes, Anthony.
I don't know. I still think we're avoiding around the question of who I really am.
So who are you, Anthony?
It's like
Now turning the mirror it on you. Now you've asked us.
this is the way I like. And Brooke, you know how I've been doing my philosophy BS and like going on about this, but it's like if I try, how would I investigate who I really am in the first place?
Mhm.
It's like if I had a microscope and I had to learn about the microscope I'm using by only using that microscope. I don't know if that could actually be done. Do you guys get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm interpreting what you're saying and pulling it into another direction. You guys have watched that show Alone, where they get dropped off in the middle of nowhere, like Alaska
I've
and
heard of
wherever.
it. I've never watched it, but I've heard of
So
it.
they're dropped off in the middle of nowhere. I love those shows. I don't know why I love them, but it's interesting to watch them go through being by themselves. You know, some of them can't take being by themselves because they are more defined on who they're with. I'm not saying I'm probably definitely one of those that I do better around humans than not around humans, that to be by myself. And of course they're foraging for food and building houses, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the personality pieces that they show up with on video, which of course are edited and it's a show. But that idea of, if nobody told us who we are, who are we? and and we get to redefine what that means, you know, as we become adults. Some of us don't realize that we get to define that, as opposed to let somebody else define who we are. But even in that definition, as I'm going deeper into this discussion, even in that conversation, isn't it still how we reflect who others are, that
Yeah.
we define, you know, what that a reality check. And so I think it's a really,
So yeah, what I'm essentially getting at, and Lisa, you're supporting that, is that like you can't really begin to define yourself unless you have something to compare yourself to or other people to use as instruments to sort of have that self-evaluation.
Mhm.
You can't learn about a microscope by only using a microscope to investigate it. It doesn't make any sort of sense. And to go further, like if you were just dropped off alone on an island and you had no one to bounce that off, sure, like you would eventually get there to finding identity, but you'd have like a context, you have a history,
They still have an
past
identity.
relationships. Like the only, and this goes into a psychology. I'm not pulling this out of thin air. I'm kind of referencing a psychologist who named Jacques Lacan, but what he essentially gets at is that the only person who has a real self that's not defined by all these relationships is like a child or a baby who hasn't learned how to speak a language yet.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, like, if you take it to example, like feral children, like, but
Yeah.
even still, after a certain age, we, if we're gonna even approach defining, as you said, if we even think about defining, we are at that point creating comparison by using words, even if it's languageless. Defining, we're building a comparison based on experience, and we as if we're going to be raised by people, which most people are, what's important is how that our parents reflect us and our behavior and everything back to us, and that becomes a really critical part of our growth. and but it's inescapable for us to I think it's not no es posible for
Yeah,
us to
like
not define
even something as simple,
basis of comparison. The definition of define is sort of in itself.
even as simple as just like a free signifier like Brooke Walters. Like if somebody asked me, okay, who is she? And I just said Brooke Walters and I let that hang in thin air. That's not like a all encompassing free thing. Like your name came from your parents. Like they
Yes.
defined your existence by virtue of just giving you a name.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even back to your question, who am I really?
We
I
could
don't
go it
think
for. I mean, according to some folks, the moon and the stars have defined who we are. So, like, um,
I'm
but
not playing in the
and we'll take it even
BS
further.
realm.
Science has proven that fear is passed down 7 generations through DNA, and that's an instinctual thing. And so, who we are and is ingrained in us and so much out of our control in so many ways that it's an interesting thing that we all assume we are this autonomous thing when in truth we are not autonomous beings at all. Uh, the
So as
oh,
you're
yeah.
pause just for a second, and then just throw out something that's sort of related but not really related, but addresses support to what you're saying. There's this language in Africa, and I don't remember what the name is, where it is. I'm giving you the basics of what I'm sharing with you. There's certain sounds that only anyone under 15 years old can pick up and assimilate. Once you're an adult and you go to that area, you will not ever hear that sound because your brain was not taught that particular adaptation of sound to hear what it is. So you would have had to be brought up to hear this,
Well,
which
there's
is what supporting what you're saying. In order to become who we are, we had to start somewhere. And our family systems, yeah, go ahead.
well, I mean, to support that. I mean, it's not just how they were taught. It's when they're taught,
Mhm.
and at what age, and
Yeah,
in those
exactly.
formative years, there's a lot of things that go on with regard to language and also with regard to formation and the muscle mouth, like how we use our mouths. So there are
Yeah.
people who can't roll their R's. There's some people that can't do that, and it's simply because they just don't have the muscle control because it wasn't something they started doing at a young age. So and won't be able to. I can't wink, but um, but again, all of this and in all of this space, we defining who we are is inescapable. I think though, if we take all of this back, and when we talk about self, and we there were a couple points that were brought forward and we've sort of touched on them, and I think it's important to touch because in these because it was something that raised a question mark for me, because in everything we watched there was a resounding or watched or read there was this resounding theme of we can't always define who we are. Sometimes we require and need, and this is even true of our formative years, so much so that our formative years are critical because our parents, how they reflect back who we are to us, makes a big deal with us being confident about ourselves and having a strong sense of self. So we rely on people outside of ourselves to know who we are. And what is interesting for me in the coaching space, that concerns me because now, and I could see a new coach or somebody coming in going, wait, if people need outside people in order to know who they are, to point out those blind spots, to do all these things, I'm a coach. How do I do that? And not for them and not give them advice or not tell them how they're being or not. If we're reliant on outside experience and feedback to define who we are, how do we tackle that as a coach?
That's a pretty difficult question because then, like, as a coach, I'm thinking, okay, as I'm getting to know my client and they're telling me who they are, a trust issue comes up where it's like, can I really trust this one person to give me an idea of who they are? Like, do I need to go out and say, hey, can I get like your parents, your
I need
coworkers,
references.
children? Can I have a conversation with them and maybe submit some tests and questionnaires to find out who you really are? And I can compare what other people think of you, what I think of you, and what you think of yourself, and then we'll find some real version. It is tough. I don't know how to really address that.
So actually, in corporate coaching, that's what they do. Exactly that. They send out, there's different terms for it, 360s, 1010s, where they send it to everyone in the company, or a select people in the company, and they ask you to fill this out towards this either person, group, or whatever their intention is. So what you're saying is done. However, it isn't done, which is the point you're making, it isn't done personally with our private world so much, unless there's an evaluation. I know when in school, if a student is struggling, they will have that kind of questionnaire sent home. But we're not talking about that either. We don't have that kind of background. So, in the space of how do we help our clients discover who they really are without telling them who they are, it takes patience and time and energy where we aren't defining them. We are able to share with them, I notice your foot is twitching. What's the foot twitching about? And then they'll define what that is. So through that discovery space of body language, through what they're sharing, we get to say, when you say that, my interpretation of it is this. Is that what you meant? It's not taking ownership of what that definition is. It's opening up that dialogue and communication.
I think so. I think that this is where all of these things where we start to talk about coaching a person and not the problem comes in, right? So what will happen over time is that person is going to reveal where the incongruities are, where the things are, right? We're going to, as a coach, over time, with given enough getting to know you and conversation, when they say, well, I really want to do this, but they don't do it over and over and over again, we start to then question around that and go, okay, well, is this really who you want to do, what you really want to do? We may also have a client that comes in and says, I am this, but they're not, for some reason, they're not ever behaving like that. And it might be that they just have been told they're that. Yeah. And it becomes a space where they've got to come to grips with, no, I'm not that. And I don't want to be that. But why am I defining myself as that? And this is where this sort of deeper exploration, and as a coach, this instinct comes in. We listen for them to share those moments of when maybe what they're saying isn't matching up with what they're doing. And inquire deeper about that. Or if they're just defining themselves as one thing, it might be our job as a coach to then push them out of their comfort zone. Or I don't mean that but get them into a space where they're comfortable getting out of that and maybe behaving in a different way than they do define themselves.
Yeah, I would agree.
You're right, Anthony, we can't go out and talk to all their friends or anything like that to figure out who they really are. But I think that over time, they will reveal who they are. And it's our job as a coach, I think, to reflect that back to them in an honest way. An honest, non-judgmental way, but an honest way. And we talked about last week being kind of tough at times. And there may come those moments where you got to be kind of willing to say, you define yourself as this, but your actions say that you're this. Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that. Mm-hmm. And that's that space where we get to tap into that sort of instinctual and also being willing to push them out of their comfort zone space, mm-hmm. and do so with reflective feedback. Mm-hmm. Fair, Anthony?
I think that's fair. I wouldn't go as far to say as we are finding the real you or discovering the real you. I don't think I would ever say that, use that kind of language in my coaching, but I don't know, the way I've always seemed to have done it when I'm talking to people in the space that were my clients, I say, this is how do you view yourself? Like, I don't say what is the real you. It's just what is your view of yourself at this moment.
No, to be fair, there may be coaches that do work with people that don't have a strong sense of self, that feel like, even go as far as to say that their sense of self is shaky, and they feel like they are sort of always defining themselves by other people and the people around them, and they feel like they're not making their own decisions.
I think we've worked with and seen a bunch of coaches who work with clients who, and I'm just throwing a blanket statement out there, a very common client archetype that I see is women who are about middle age now, and they're no longer really, their kids are out of the house, they're no
Empty
longer working,
nesters.
whatever, and they're divorced. So whatever did define them was their marriage, their children, and the work, things that have to do with other people. And they're kind of left alone to define themselves when they never really did before.
They're in a unique position where they can.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so they're in a position where I got to figure out who I really am. And they'll ask those kind of questions to figure out what to do next. Now that they don't have these things, and I mean, I'm just going off of hypothetical situations now, so I won't really
So,
go any further,
and
but it's a
I'll
common
take it
occurrence.
to a non-hypothetical situation. Again, I'm somebody. I identify as a survivor. I was with also in a relationship that was not healthy. I was in a relationship where I was gaslit. I was in a relationship where I was constantly told that I was worthless, that I was useless, that I was, a waste, that I was all of these things. And on the inside, said, I'm not these things. I'm not. And I kept saying to myself on the inside, I am not these effing things. But when you have this person in your life that is constantly telling you you are this, it breaks you down. It does. And you start to question, is this who I am? And it can start to really shake and shatter this sense of self. And I was strong enough to reach a point that I was like, I'm not this person. I'm going to prove you wrong. Get the F out. What the hell? You know what I mean? But I allowed that for a long time, and it can be very damaging to self-esteem. It can knock you down. And so that is in a situation where you've got somebody that's convinced you that you are this thing. And I will say, once out of that, as I peeled back the layers, like, and it took a long time. It wasn't something where, like, I'm out of this relationship, I've got all this confidence, all of that manipulation and stuff is gone and isn't still affecting me. No, it took time for me to peel off layers, and as each layer folded, I would realize, no, I'm not that. I'm actually this. And no, but then something would come up, and this negative thought process, these things that I'm told. And you can go back to as far as if you had a parent that did that, where all of a sudden you've got this bing, oh my God, you're worthless, oh my God, you're useless. And that pops up. And having to stop and address, wait, where the hell is this coming from? Am I really this? And then having that conversation and building myself sort of back up, was a very tough thing for me to do. And it took a lot of strength, and I'm proud of myself now. But even coming out of that too, there's so many questions, like, how did I get into that relationship? Can I trust myself? And so there's it's a whole thing that where we can think that we've got this concrete sense of self, and we just should. But there are so many situations where I think people can find themselves questioning who they are. And a lot of times that is because of outside influence coming in. And it's hard. It says, I don't care who you are, as strong as you think you are. No, I'd never let somebody do that to me. I felt like that, and I ended up in that situation where I allowed it, and it got knocked down, and it made me question a whole lot about myself. So I think everybody's susceptible. You look at like mass manipulators. You know what I mean? People who, if you take Jeffrey, or no, wait, what's his face? What was the guy that Manson, Charles Manson?
He still has the ability.
Or, I mean, just people. There are these crazy situations where people act out of self, for one reason or another, and they come out of it. And they're like, yeah, I don't even know. And can you? I mean, it's a whole mind game trying to figure out who you are again. But what's fair is so that brings me to my next question is when I'm thinking of that and I'm sharing it, and as I was being told I was something, and inside I'm screaming, I'm not that. You just don't know me. I'm gonna prove you wrong. On the inside, I had this thing in me that said, I am not. Knew I wasn't that. That sense of knowing. Um, do you think everybody has this innate sense of knowing of um,
No.
or is that something that was unique, to me in my situation?
I
I think
don't have that sense. I can't really say for sure that I've ever really felt that way about myself or if ever really related to myself that way.
But if somebody told you something that I know for a fact you are not, Anthony, is it
Hmm.
that if somebody told you were stupid every day for a year,
Mhm.
after a while, would you start to believe you were stupid, or would there be something inside you that said, "No, I'm not effing stupid"?
I mean, I would be curious as to why they thought that. Like, my go to instinct is to be like, oh, I would probably humor them, be like, okay, I'm stupid. Tell me why.
Yeah,
Please,
but
please put it into simple terms that I can understand as a stupid person why you think I'm stupid, and then we'll go from there.
well, that's when you're dealing with a rational human being. But when you're dealing with folks who are acting and behaving irrationally or manipulatively, you can't logic them. It just doesn't work because they're gonna
can
Then
gaslight
I
you
would
and
question myself
but
as
use
to why
emotion and yeah.
then I would question myself as to why am I around this irrational, stupid person.
And then you keep hanging out with him. And then after a while, you go, "I really am stupid because I'm still here. He's right."
I think you're now projecting onto me, but I don't know if I. This is probably due to my own upbringing, where I didn't have that sort of thing where anybody was telling me you are this thing, and damn you if you say otherwise. It's no, it's I've pretty much been left to my own devices, and thankfully I had supportive parents who tolerated my somewhat annoying antics as a teenager. Um, and but I never had that situation occur where someone's like, "You're this thing," and I say internally, "I know that I'm not this thing. I'm something else." Maybe I mean, if somebody came along, I'm pretty secure in my gender identity. If someone said you're a woman, I'd probably be like, "No, I don't think I've ever really exhibited these qualities or really thought this way."
Which is really interesting because that is entirely a societal construct too. They've done studies where they took groups of men and groups of women, and they, for extended periods of time, fed to the women that they were traditionally masculine traits, and then they fed to the men that they were traditionally feminine traits. And over time, the men began to exhibit the feminine traits, and the women began to exhibit the masculine traits, proving that in so many ways we are what we are told we are.
I mean, this gets into a very other can of
Yes.
worms, but I'll just say feminine traits and masculine traits do not define my identity as a man
Okay.
that I just take for granted. It's something that I don't even think about until it's brought up in conversations like that. And the fact that I probably don't think of it even that often I think means I'm pretty secure in my identity in that sense. But I've never been in that situation before, so I couldn't really say that I have that internal sense of just I know I'm something, and because
What
I think
about
when you're at that point, it's just it blends into the background. You don't think about it that way.
is there anything you're insecure about?
Me, my height. I'm a short king. A man.
Well, that's
I mean, realistically, I'm not, but that's
I would
just
say like
like
personality, but I'm like by comparison, the certain situations you might be really tall. um, so
that's a very patronizing way to describe that, but
no,
sure.
but I just mean there's like you can't conclusively say that you're short or that you're not tall. I guess if you're looking over like a grand scheme of, I mean, I don't know. Have
Yeah,
you?
but
Where are you?
you only asked something that I was did
I
you say
know,
something
but
just about
it's not really. I guess does your height define yourself, who you are?
in a way, yeah. Because if I was a tall giant man, people would be treating me differently and I would probably think about myself in a different way. Whereas,
know.
honestly, I know that I'm average height, but it seems to me that average height male means short. At least what I see on the online discourse. But I'm not an incredibly short person. I'm not like, Samson from that show we watch, Carnival. If I was a shorter person and people treated me that way, I'd probably think about myself a different way.
There's so many things I could dig into this with, like, that I'm not going to, that I could.
But I'm choosing something specifically that I can't really influence. I was just born the height that I am. I could wear high heels. That would probably create a whole other set of problems for me to deal with. But I don't typically think about it too often until I encounter a really tall person.
I wonder how you said that people treat you differently, and we're running out of time, as a result of your height. How do people treat you that is different?
And how would you know?
Well, I think about the way that tall people are treated generally in Western society. There's the halo effect. Women seem to desire taller men in general. I'm speaking statistically, not from personal experience. I've done very well for myself as a short man. But people view taller people as more powerful, more trustworthy, more capable.
Now I'm gonna watch Invader Zim.
Yeah, but this is all. I'm like, this is kind of conjecture, though.
Yeah,
I'm just applying my own way of viewing really tall people. Like, I remember when I saw Dan for the first time in real life, I was like, Jesus Christ, you're tall. Didn't know he was that tall. It surprised me. I want to surprise people and scare people. But I can't do that.
Did your impression of Dan and who he was as a person change because of his height?
Yeah.
How?
I didn't think he was that tall.
I never.
And then I did.
But and when I think what Brooke
I
is
see tall
asking,
people and I think, oh man, they're gonna live a shorter life. That sucks. Like, that's what goes through my
Another
head.
thing. Like, if you go the opposite direction, they've got gigantism, and then that person's self-identity is like, oh crap, I'm gonna die by the age I'm 30.
That's well, no, exactly. Like, I've known some really tall people, and all of them died before the age of 50 because their hearts just could not do. So that's what goes through my head. I see somebody tall, and I'm all, crap, poor thing. They're gonna not live the longest life.
But this is such a microcosm. Like, this is one physical trait that contextualizes and informs like a person's self-image.
Mhm.
I could go bald within the next few years. That would drastically change my self-image of myself. A lot of different things could happen.
Which is interesting.
What's
But I
interesting?
guess, no, our exterior is important for our interior.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
but I want to go back. What Brooke asked you is when you saw Dan, you said something changed. And I don't mean just noticing, damn, you're tall. That. What else changed?
I would say there's a sense of physical presence that changes. Where, like, think of Tony Robbins. He's a big, tall guy who takes up a lot of space. When somebody in personality and in the physical sense is impressing themselves in a spatial way, like, there's a congruity there. Whereas if you saw a very short person carry themselves with a lot of breadth and I don't know,
Go to Hollywood. They're everywhere.
yeah. And that incongruity sort of draws your attention. Whereas if you saw a really short guy who's got anger issues and is always trying to like prove themselves, like, you say they got little man syndrome, like, that's a common thing that's said about angry short people.
Which is
I don't know.
Total stereotype.
And then the angry tall.
I'm talking about stereotypes here, but stereotypes do matter to a certain
No, and
extent.
all of this, I mean, so all of this defines, we were running out of time. So all of this defines, just this is a great space for you to share, Anthony, because as a coach, Anthony walks in, he's got all this he's defined himself as based on his height.
Self-loathing.
And it might come a day where Anthony's like, I can't do that, I'm short.
I can't
And-
reach the tall stuff on the shelf of the grocery store. But damned if I'll ask someone for help. I'll just not get the thing.
and as a coach, we might be presented with an opportunity to assist our client in redefining how they define themselves, or choosing a different lens to look at themselves through, or even to look at whatever it is they're doing, or even to address the lenses our clients are using. If we're using, Anthony's looking through the average height guy lens, and maybe that's how our client is seeing the world. So as a coach, it is important for us to know, and then also to perhaps utilize that lens when our instinct and intuition tells us to, and whether that be through mirroring and reflection, or through addressing it head on and being like, okay, well, how is this view of yourself affecting your outcomes? So very important that we as coaches learn and identify how our clients define
To
themselves.
even add to that too, how is other people's view of you affecting your outcomes? Going back to, people think I'm unapproachable, but I myself, I think I want to be an approachable person. I think of myself as that way, but other people are telling me something different. And so a lot of times I feel like in my coaching and other people's coaching probably as well, we try to discount what other people are saying and try to focus on how the client views themselves and evaluates themselves. But it is important how other people view them because it affects them that way.
It is affecting who they are.
Maybe, as for coaches out there watching this, maybe try to take into account how other people view the client and if that affects them or not.
I mean, it might be our inclination as a coach to go, well, it doesn't matter what other people think. What do you think? But that's us is telling right there. So it might actually be a space to ask, so what does that perception of you mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
And a space to sort of create this exploration.
Yeah.
But all very important.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Lisa and Jerome, you guys have to sign off.
Okay, I just want to kind of go back to my original statement when asked if I know who I really am. I think we kind of covered the ground why I believe that. I think your environment greatly affects, at least me. I can't speak for everybody, but I think for me, myself, I think it greatly affects who you genuinely think that you are. And again, with those core values that I mentioned, at the very least, they're kind of like buoys for me to kind of hang on to help determine for myself whether or not I'm in the right environment, whether it's time to shift environments. So I think that's the important thing. I don't know if we can ever really know who we are. I just think it shifts and things ebb and flow. It's so much change going on around us all the time. Unless you're a monk, isolated somewhere else, I really don't think that you can genuinely say you know who you are if you've lived life for a certain amount of time, because things again they change so often. So with that, I do want to say, I think core values are important. If you really want to get to kind of trying to define who you are as a person, just define those core values, and then from there, I think you have a pretty good understanding as to where to move from at that point. And as a coach, understanding your clients' core values, I think, is important because those are the buoys that you can keep coming back to reflect to them. This is what you said is important. This is what you believe in. This happened. And this is kind of you're acting a bit irrational, or not irrational, but you're acting non-congruent with what you said you believe in and what you said is important. So as a coach, you kind of use those buoys again to kind of come back to whatever goals that it may be that a client is trying to achieve. So that's my final thoughts.
And as you were saying that, and you were talking about a monk goes through these same kinds of trials and tribulations. It's much quieter, right? And I think of the Dalai Lama, he definitely has his trials and tribulations.
He has Twitter. I follow him. He's not isolated.
Just kidding. Well, then I have an uncle that's, he's a priest, and I mean, they all go through different perspectives of how the outside world impacts them and who they want to be. I myself, I got the sun. Which way do I go? I myself, I have learned part of what is helpful to me is to be able to share with those I trust, but then I don't necessarily want any feedback till I've had time to evaluate what it is and where I want to go and what's important in this space, so that I don't want to be influenced from their perspective. I need to have that internal reflection to really identify, but I need to be able to say it out loud. So that's where that coach comes in. People that love and care about me want me to, do the right thing and be supported and all these kinds of things. But to me, I've got to figure it out what that next step is and how it looks. So with clients, I'm not going to tell them who they are or what they are going to do next or what serves them. The challenge, like we were talking about last week, Brooke and I don't know, maybe Anthony, somebody brought up, and challenge them on that perspective. Really, who do they want to define themselves as? And be curious about what they share. There is a client, as I'm thinking, I know I got to wrap this up, stop talking. There is a client who defined himself as a very logical person. But my interpretation and my judgment, he was a very emotional person. So I checked that at the door. And then we worked on things the way he wanted to work on things. I didn't need to define him. I needed to understand his definition and let him redefine who he wanted to be and what that meant. And eventually he came to the conclusion that he's basing things on emotion versus logic, but that takes time and it didn't need me to influence him. Anyway, thanks for showing up, everyone. Good to see you. Some new additional names that we haven't seen in a while. Thanks for being here. We have our Certified Life Coach Institute. We have our classes in 3 days. Come join us. We have a lot of fun, a lot of deep discussions, and great participation. Lives every Tuesday at 4. Thank you so much.
Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, share, whatever platform you're on. We appreciate it, everybody. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do so. And we will see you next week, same time.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Once again, this is brought to you by Certified Life Coach Institute. We're an ICF accredited school who certifies our life coaches in 3-day online intensive courses. In addition to other podcast episodes, feel free to check us out every Tuesday at 4:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on YouTube or Facebook for our CLCI Lives, where we get together and discuss various topics that are centered around sharpening your skills so you can become a better certified life coach. For more information, feel free to visit us at certifiedlifecoachinstitute.com. Until next time, be well.